When the nurse called him by another woman's name, something in me cracked. It wasn't loud, not like glass breaking or a shout across a hallway. It was quiet, like the sound of a small truth slipping into the light after hiding too long in the dark. I stood there, in that sterile hospital corridor, the smell of disinfectant stinging my nose. Machines hummed behind closed curtains. The nurse's voice had been soft, gentle, even, but the name she used wasn't mine. "Don't worry, Vanessa, he's going to be okay," she'd said. And my husband had smiled. That smile, that weak, fleeting, tired smile that didn't belong to me anymore. I should have said something right then. Should have asked, "Who's Vanessa?" But instead, I froze. My palms damp, heart thudding in my chest like it was trying to warn me about something I wasn't ready to face. Because just 3 hours earlier, I was praying over his hospital bed, thanking God he'd survived that accident. Before the accident, my life was steady, maybe even a little too quiet. I was a school counselor, the kind of woman who remembered birthdays, who packed lunches, who ironed shirts even when no one asked her to. My husband Marcus was a contractor, charming, confident, always on the move. We'd been married for 13 years. 13 years of good days, bad days, and the kind of everyday love that doesn't make headlines but feels safe. We weren't perfect. No marriages. There were weeks we barely spoke beyond logistics, what to cook, who would pick up our daughter Mia from choir, whose turn it was to take the trash out. But we laughed too. We had routines. Friday night takeout, Sunday service, lazy Saturday mornings when Marcus would make pancakes and hum some off-key tune from the radio. I used to think that's what happiness was. The small, ordinary moments stitched together over years. But ordinary can hide a lot of secrets. The day of the accident started like any other. Marcus kissed me goodbye that morning, coffee on his breath, and promised to be home by 6. He was working on a renovation project across town, an old farmhouse someone wanted to flip. At 3 in the afternoon, my phone rang. An unfamiliar voice asked, "Is this Mrs. Turner?" "Yes," I said, already feeling the world tilt. "This is Officer Ramirez from County Hospital. Your husband's been in a car accident. He's stable, but you should come as soon as possible." For a second, I couldn't breathe. All I heard was the word accident. It rolled through my mind like thunder. The drive to the hospital was a blur, red lights, horns, a rain that started out of nowhere. By the time I arrived, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely sign the visitor's form. When I saw him, bruised, pale, but breathing, I cried. Not the pretty kind of crying. The kind that comes from the gut. He reached out a weak hand and said, "Baby, I'm okay. I'm sorry." Sorry? For what? I didn't ask. I just held his hand and told him to rest. Forgiveness felt easy then, natural. I thought maybe he'd been distracted, tired, maybe ran a red light. Accidents happen. We move on. But later that evening, as the nurses shifted him to another room, I stepped outside to grab coffee. When I came back, I heard the nurse's voice. That name again. Vanessa. And this time he responded. My coffee went cold in my hand as I stood there in the doorway. The nurse was fluffing his pillow, smiling like she knew something I didn't. He looked embarrassed, not because I was there, but because she'd said it out loud. When she left, I walked in. "Who's Vanessa?" He blinked like he didn't hear me. "Baby, you look tired. You should go home. Get some rest." "Don't do that," I said, my voice shaking. "Don't change the subject." "Who is Vanessa?" He closed his eyes. "Nobody. Just a friend who helped me out on the project. A friend." I wanted to believe him. God knows I did. The exhaustion, the machines beeping, the fourth drip, it all made me feel guilty for even asking. So I nodded slowly, forcing a smile. "Okay," I whispered. "Rest." But that night, as I drove home alone, that name echoed inside me. Vanessa. It wasn't just a name anymore. It was a question I couldn't unask. I tried to brush it off. For 3 days, I visited him morning and evening, bringing his favorite soup, talking about Mia's homework, pretending everything was fine. But every time a nurse or doctor came in, he looked nervous, tense, like he was guarding something. On the fourth day, a woman called my phone. "Hi, this is Vanessa," she said. Her voice was calm, polite. Too calm. "I heard Marcus was in an accident. I just wanted to check if he's okay." For a few seconds, I couldn't find my voice. "How did you get my number?" "Oh, he gave it to me, months ago. Said you handle all the family stuff." She laughed softly. "You're such a strong woman." I ended the call before she could say anything else. That night, I didn't sleep. Marcus came home a week later. Bandaged arm, tired eyes, acting like nothing happened. He hugged Mia, joked about hospital food, even thanked me for taking care of things. And for a while, I played along. But once you hear a truth, even halfway, you can't unhear it. You start noticing patterns. Phone calls at odd hours, sudden showers before dinner, messages that vanish before you can read them. Forgiveness starts to feel heavy when you realize what you forgave wasn't even real. One evening, as I was folding laundry, his phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up. A message. "Vanessa. Glad you're healing, love. I miss you." My hand went cold. That was the moment I knew the accident didn't reveal a tragedy. It revealed the truth. I stared at that message until the screen dimmed to black. There it was, the thing I'd been pretending not to see, sitting right in front of me, glowing in soft white letters that burned through everything I thought I knew. "Glad you're healing, love. I miss you." That last word, love, felt like a knife twisted slow. I didn't open the message, didn't scroll, didn't breathe for what felt like a full minute. Then I did the only thing I could. I put the phone down quietly, finished folding the laundry, and carried the basket upstairs. Because in that moment I realized, if I reacted now, if I screamed or cried or threw that phone, it would give him the satisfaction of seeing me broken. And I wasn't ready to break. Not yet. That night, I lay beside him, the sound of his steady breathing in the dark, and thought about every moment that led us here. The nights I stayed up waiting for him. The meals gone cold. The messages he never answered. The days he said he was too tired, but somehow always had energy for everyone else. When you love someone, you build them into your world piece by piece, and sometimes you don't notice they've started building someone else into theirs. The next morning, I made coffee as usual. I asked him how he slept, kissed him on the cheek, and watched him leave for his follow-up appointment. Then I opened his phone. I know what people will say: you shouldn't snoop. You should trust. But trust had already left the room. It had packed its bags the moment Vanessa called my phone. The messages were all there, hidden under a contact saved as V contractor. They'd been talking for nearly a year. Photos, laughs, plans. He'd even sent her a message the night before the accident. "Wish you were with me instead of her." Her. That's what I'd become. Just her. I remember sitting there on the couch, his phone heavy in my hand, and realizing that every act of forgiveness I'd ever given him, every small mercy, every second chance, had been spent on a man who didn't even see it. And still, the strangest thing happened. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just went numb, like my body decided to shut off the emotions and my mind could process the facts. The accident that nearly killed him. It wasn't random. According to the texts, he'd been arguing with her while driving. He was texting her when he crashed. That was the part that broke me. He could have died and it wouldn't have been me he was thinking about. That evening when he came home, I had dinner waiting. Lasagna, his favorite. I set the table perfectly, candles, soft music, wine. He looked surprised. "What's the occasion?" "Nothing," I said softly. "Just glad you're home." We ate in silence for a while. Then, halfway through the meal, I said, "Marcus, do you believe people can really change?" He looked at me, cautious. "I think so. Yeah, even after hurting someone." He set down his fork. "What's this about?" I smiled, just a question. He reached for my hand and I almost let him. But something inside me flinched. I could feel the weight of that other woman's name in every space between us. That night, when he fell asleep, I packed a small bag. Not to leave, not yet. Just enough to remind myself I still had a choice. I drove to my sister's house across town and sat in her driveway for nearly an hour before I finally went in. She took one look at me and knew. What did he do this time? I told her everything. The texts, the call, the nurse, all of it. She listened, quiet, then said, "You don't have to decide tonight. But whatever you do, make sure it's for you, not for him." The next morning, I went back home. Marcus was in the kitchen making coffee, humming that same off-key tune I used to love. He looked up and smiled like nothing had happened. And that's when something inside me shifted. I realized he wasn't afraid of losing me. He was afraid of losing his comfort, the home, the forgiveness, the woman who always stayed. So I decided to give him one more gift. The truth. After breakfast I said calmly, "I know about Vanessa." The words dropped between us like a stone into still water. His face went pale. "What are you talking about?" "I saw the messages," I said. "The ones where you call her love. The ones where you said you wished she was with you instead of me." He didn't deny it. He didn't even try. He just sighed, rubbing his forehead. "I didn't mean to hurt you. It just happened." "An affair doesn't just happen, Marcus," I said. "You build it, the same way we built this marriage. Except you built that one in secret." He stared at me, eyes glassy. "I made a mistake." "No," I whispered. "You made a choice." That was the first time in years I saw him speechless. He tried to explain, to tell me it was over, that she meant nothing. But those were just words, and words had become cheap between us. When he reached for my hand, I pulled away. And for the first time, he looked afraid. Not because he'd lost my love, but because he knew I'd finally found my strength. I didn't throw him out that night. I didn't scream or cry or demand apologies. Instead, I told him to sleep in the guest room. He opened his mouth to argue, but something in my eyes must have stopped him. He went quietly, and when the door closed behind him, I sat alone in the kitchen, the ticking clock loud in the silence. I poured myself a glass of wine and whispered into the empty room, "I forgave you once, Marcus, but never again." The days that followed felt strangely still. Marcus moved around the house like a guest, polite, quiet, careful not to touch anything that might remind me of what we used to be. He slept in the guest room, made his own meals, and tiptoed around me as if silence could fix what words had destroyed. But silence only made the truth louder. I kept hearing it everywhere, in the clinking of his coffee mug, in the soft closing of doors, in the hum of the washing machine. Everything sounded like a lie trying to sound normal. And I think that's what hurt the most, not the betrayal itself, but the pretense that life could go back to before. 3 nights later, he knocked on my bedroom door. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. I nodded, even though part of me didn't want to hear anything more. He sat at the edge of the bed like a man on trial. "I ended things with her," he said. "For good. I told her it was a mistake, that I want to fix this." "Fix us?" I looked at him for a long moment. "Why now, Marcus? Because you got caught? Or because you realized you almost died? And I was the only one who showed up?" He blinked, startled. "That's not fair. It's the truth," I said, keeping my voice calm. "You didn't think about me when you were with her. You didn't think about me when you texted her from the hospital. But now that you need forgiveness again, suddenly I'm the only thing that matters." He sighed, rubbing his face. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I need you to know I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't fix what's broken," I said softly. "It just names the mess." After he left the room, I lay awake for hours. Part of me wanted to believe him, to cling to the idea that maybe, somehow, people really could change. But another part of me, the quiet, tired part, knew that love without trust is just a habit. And I was done living in habit. That night, I opened my laptop and started a new document titled Divorce Papers Draft. I didn't know if I'd finish it, but starting it felt like breathing again. The next morning, I called the hospital to settle some of the bills. While on hold, I heard a familiar voice on the other end of the line, soft, careful, with that same tone I'd heard the day of the accident. "Nurse Vanessa speaking. How can I help you?" For a second, my chest went cold. It was her, the Vanessa. She wasn't just anyone. She was the nurse from that day, the same one who had called him baby in the recovery room. It all clicked together. She wasn't some random affair. She had been there that day, maybe even visited him before I arrived. My hand tightened on the phone. I didn't say a word. I just hung up. Something inside me shifted again that day, not out of anger, but clarity. If he was willing to lie about something that deep, that public, that dangerous. Then what else had I excused in the name of love? It wasn't about catching him anymore. It was about reclaiming myself. So, I made a plan. The next weekend, we were invited to a small family gathering at his mother's house. I hadn't planned on going, but then I thought maybe this is exactly where the truth needs to be seen. Marcus begged me not to make things awkward. I just want to keep it peaceful, he said. I smiled and told him, of course, honey, peaceful. Peaceful can mean a lot of things. His mother adored me, always had. She hugged me tight at the door, whispering, you've been such a blessing to him. I don't know what he'd do without you. And for a moment, I almost cried. Because she didn't know. None of them did. Dinner was loud, filled with laughter and family stories. Marcus was animated, trying to pretend everything was fine. I sat beside him, quiet, watching. At one point, his phone buzzed on the table. He flinched, snatched it quickly, and turned it face down. I looked at him and smiled. Still keeping secrets? I said, low enough that only he could hear. His hand froze. Then, softly, I stood and clinked my glass. Can I say something? I asked. The table quieted. His mother smiled warmly. Of course, dear. I took a deep breath. I just want to thank everyone for being here. Family means so much to me. Especially after the year we've had the accident. The recovery. The revelations. Marcus's fork slipped from his hand. A faint clatter against porcelain. I continued. Sometimes life reminds you that forgiveness is a gift, not a guarantee. And that love, real love, doesn't lie behind someone else's name on your husband's phone. A hush fell over the table. His sister looked from him to me, her mouth parting slightly. His mother frowned. What's going on? Marcus whispered, Emma. Don't do this here. I turned to him calmly. Why not? You had no problem doing that there. It wasn't shouting. It wasn't chaos. It was quiet truth. And sometimes quiet truth shakes a room more than any scream ever could. He stammered, tried to deny, but his mother cut in. Marcus, what is she talking about? He looked at the table, his voice low. It's complicated. I said, it's not. It's called cheating. And with that I stood, placed my napkin gently on the table, and said, dinner was lovely. Thank you for having me. Then I walked out. In the car, I sat in silence for a long time. I thought I'd feel triumphant, like justice had been served. But instead I just felt free. Because revenge, I realized, wasn't about making him hurt. It was about letting go of the weight of pretending. He had taken my trust, but I was taking back my peace. When I got home, I opened my laptop again and finished the divorce papers. Every line I typed felt like a breath of fresh air after years of holding it in. By the time the sun rose the next morning, I had signed my name at the bottom. Not as his wife, but as myself again. I thought that walking away from that dinner would be the end of it. But endings are rarely clean, especially when you've lived your whole life, trying to keep things respectable. By the next morning, the phone wouldn't stop buzzing. His sister called first, then his mother, then finally Marcus. I ignored all of them. But one voicemail from his mother stopped me cold. Her voice trembled. Emma, I don't know what happened between you two, but Marcus hasn't come out of his room since last night. Please, if there's anything you can do. For a brief, flickering moment, I felt the old reflex that pull to fix things, to comfort, to protect him from his own mess. But then I remembered the hospital bed, the whisper of Vanessa, and the text that confirmed everything. I wasn't his savior anymore. Still, I knew the truth needed to be seen, not hidden behind polite silences and family dinners. So when his sister called again that evening, I answered. Emma, what did you mean last night? She asked softly. I hesitated. Then, calmly, I said, ask your brother. There was a pause. Then, he won't talk. Mom says he's ashamed. Good, I said. He should be. 2 days later, the story began to spread. First among his friends, then the wider circle. People love a scandal, especially one wrapped in the quiet tragedy of a perfect marriage. At first, I hated the whispers. But then I realized I didn't have to defend myself anymore. The truth was doing that for me. Even the hospital gossip caught wind of it. One of Marcus's colleagues, a doctor, reached out to me privately. He said, "I don't want to get involved, but you should know. Vanessa transferred departments. Apparently, things got messy between her and Marcus after the accident." Messy, what a polite word for destruction. I didn't respond to Marcus's calls for nearly a week. When I finally did, it was through a single message. "The papers are on the kitchen counter. I'll be out by Friday. Please respect that." He showed up that night anyway. He stood at the doorway, eyes red, hands trembling. "Emma, please don't do this." His voice cracked, the same voice that once made me believe in forever. "You already did," I said. He stepped closer. "I made a mistake." I was scared, lost, confused. I cut him off. "No, Marcus. You were comfortable. You knew I'd forgive you again and again because I always have. You counted on that." Tears welled in his eyes. "I love you." "Maybe," I said. "But love without honesty is just manipulation dressed in poetry." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he whispered, "Everyone knows now. My family, my job. That's not my doing," I said quietly. "That's just the echo of your own choices catching up to you." He left without another word. And when the door closed behind him, I felt a stillness I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't peace yet, but it was the beginning of it. A week later, I ran into his mother at the grocery store. Her face looked tired, older somehow. She walked up to me slowly, clutching a basket of apples. "I didn't know," she said softly. "I had no idea what he'd done." I nodded. "I know." She looked down at the floor. "He's lost. I think he's drinking again." The words made me flinch, not out of guilt, but out of recognition. That was the Marcus I used to know, always hiding from pain, instead of facing it. I put a gentle hand on her arm. "He'll have to find his own way now. You can love him, but you can't carry him." She nodded, eyes glistening. "You were good to him, Emma. Better than he deserved." For the first time in months, I smiled. A real smile, small but sincere. I was good to myself too, eventually. After that day, I began the slow work of reclaiming my life. I painted the kitchen walls a soft cream color, replaced the old wedding photos with landscapes, and started baking again, not because anyone expected me to, but because the smell of cinnamon made me feel safe. Some mornings, I'd wake up and instinctively reach for the other side of the bed, only to find it empty. And instead of sadness, I felt gratitude. Because empty can also mean open. A few weeks later, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly, Marcus's. Inside was a short note. "You were right. I didn't deserve your forgiveness. I just didn't know how to live without it. I'm sorry for everything. I hope one day you find someone who sees you the way I should have." I read it once, folded it neatly, and placed it in a drawer, not out of sentiment, but closure. Life moved forward quietly after that. I got a new job at the local library, started a small garden in the backyard, and even joined a book club. Nothing grand, nothing dramatic, just ordinary peace. The kind that doesn't need an audience. But sometimes, late at night, I'd catch myself thinking about the hospital, that sterile smell, the steady beep of machines, the voice that called him baby. And I'd realize that day wasn't just the moment I discovered his affair. It was the moment I rediscovered myself. The first morning after Marcus moved out, I made a cup of coffee and sat by the window. The sun spilled through the blinds, dust motes dancing like tiny gold flecks in the air. For a long moment I just breathed. No anger, no shame, no tension coiling in my chest. It was strange how quiet the house felt without him. Strange how peaceful. I thought about all the times I had forgave him before, not once, not twice, but countless times. I had forgiven him for small lies, for hidden frustrations, for that subtle drift away from me that I tried to chalk up to stress. But this betrayal had been different. It had cut deeper than anything else, because it wasn't just a stranger. It was someone I loved, someone I trusted, someone I had opened my home and heart to. And yet, even in the darkness of that discovery, I realized something important. Forgiveness wasn't for him. It was for me. I have forgiven him in the hospital that first day because I wanted to feel whole again. I had forgiven him in my mind even as I uncovered the truth, because I refused to let his choices dictate my self-worth. And now, weeks later, I could finally say that I had forgiven myself for letting this happen, for trusting, for loving fully. The days turned into weeks, and slowly I found comfort in the small routines that I had neglected while trying to fix a marriage that was never really mine to fix. I planted flowers in the garden and watched them bloom. I pored over books I had put aside, letting words wash over me like a balm. I called my sister more often, not to gossip or complain, but just to hear a familiar voice and laugh at old memories. Even Marcus eventually became just a memory, a complicated one, yes, but no longer a shadow over my happiness. I learned to set boundaries, to trust my instincts, and most importantly, to love myself without needing validation from anyone else. And then came the day I decided to share my story publicly. I recorded myself in the living room, warm sunlight spilling across my face, speaking slowly and deliberately. I told the story, every painful, heart-wrenching detail. I didn't hide the tears, nor did I exaggerate the moments of anger. I told it honestly, as I had lived it. Greater than, I forgave him, I said into the camera, voice steady, but life has a way of revealing truths we aren't ready to see. And sometimes the real lesson isn't about the betrayal. It's about finding strength inside yourself, even when the world feels like it's collapsing around you. After uploading, I leaned back in my chair, feeling lighter than I had in months. Comments began to trickle in. Words of empathy, encouragement, and even shared experiences from women who had walked similar paths. It surprised me how many people had quietly suffered in silence, waiting for a story like mine to remind them that they were not alone. A few months later, I met a man at the library, kind, gentle, and patient. We didn't rush anything. We shared laughter over coffee, long walks in the park, and quiet afternoons reading side by side. I never called him my second chance or the one who healed me. He was simply someone who respected the woman I had become. And me? I was learning to enjoy my own company as much as his. I realized that happiness doesn't always come with fireworks or dramatic declarations. Sometimes it comes quietly, a morning light, a cup of coffee, a garden full of blooms, and the knowledge that you survived, whole and unbroken. Looking back, I understand now that the accident, the hospital, and the whisper of another woman's name weren't just events of betrayal. They were wake-up calls. Life doesn't always give us what we expect, but it does give us what we need. And what I needed was to reclaim myself, to choose dignity over rage, clarity over confusion, and self-love over dependency. So here I am, telling my story not to shame anyone, but to share a lesson I had to learn the hard way. Forgiveness is powerful, but not when it blinds you. Trust is precious, but not when it keeps you silent. And strength, real strength, comes not from punishing others, but from honoring yourself every single day. Would you have found the courage to walk away? Would you have forgiven yourself first, before anyone else? If my story resonates, share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your journey. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life, first-person stories that remind us of the power of resilience, hope, and healing.